I was working in the lab late one night when my eyes beheld an eerie sight. A monster in a slab began to rise, and suddenly, to my surprise, he did the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. Come on, the flash. He did the monster mash from a laboratory at the castle east. The most all came from that roads to get him shows from my electrodes. They played the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. It got on with the flash. They played the monster mash. The zombies were having fun. But the hunting had just begun. The guests included Wolfman, Dracula, and his son. The scene was rocking out in the sounds, either on stage by his bag, as the coffin bangers were about to arrive with their vocal group, the Quick Take of Five. They played the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. It got on with the flash. They played the monster mash. From his mother glass was still ringing. It seems he was troubled. Just one thing, he opened the lid and saw his face and said,
My Transylvania twist?
It's now the monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. It got on with the flash. It's now the monster mash. Now everything's cool. Monster mash is a hit on the land. For you, the living, this mash was news too. Tell them more, listen. Then you can monster mash into my graveyard smash. You'll catch on with the flash. Then you can monster mash. Then you can monster mash into my graveyard smash. You'll catch on in a flash. Then you can monster mash.
Salutations, ghouls and freaks. Welcome to Podcast Their Storm, where insane slashers, undead blood drinkers, and all-around crooked beans convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the Mage of Madness, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, my children of the night.
And I am... Oh, hold on. Let me edit my avatar real quick.
I was gonna say you hadn't. There we go.
Yeah, sorry. My brain has been scattered the last few days. I've been sick. I'm getting better. I've actually caught it before it really started to get bad, so...
That's good.
Yeah. And I am your Scarecrow impersonator, the Brainstorm of Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight?
I am so freaking glad that summer is over and we are once again in that glorious piece of temporal real estate known as the October country. And as summer dies, winter rises. Hooray. I wait all year for these 3 months, man. And it's so good to be back in them.
So yeah, okay, so fun fact, Dalton sent me like a week before a whole bunch of articles that we'll be covering this month. So we're not lacking.
There's a month, there's probably a month worth of articles there.
Yeah,
to go with.
And although fun fact, most of this week is mine. Just because I had sent a bunch of stuff too, and I do plan on sending some more stuff. Mostly videos and stuff for us to watch.
And I'll see if I can find some of those that we haven't already done. Like, I know we've done a couple Renegade Cup videos. I know we've also done a couple Lacey Green videos. And I don't, off the top of my head, know of any more recent videos in that vein. But we will see what we can find here.
I'll be honest, I'll be fine just covering some articles, and we can just watch just for to end on somewhat of a high note. We could watch like stuff related to October.
Hmm. I know Arith Thurger did a recent video on the history of Halloween. We might do that one.
Great.
Arith Thurger is a really cool creator. He's a Norse pagan dude, and he looks at things very much through an academic lens. There's also Angela Symposium. I know she did a video. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. So this is from the Young Democratic Socialists of America.org. Bracing the Red Scare, a guide to a socialist Halloween. This is published October 31st, 2023. Huh.
Yep. As per usual, we will be splitting our criticism of moralistic stupidity between a bunch of SJW bullshit and a bunch of Bible thumping bullshit, because these people have nothing better to do with their lives than ruin everything that is fun. Apparently.
Wait, was there another article I had to?
There was.
Fuck, I can't. Fuck, I forgot to put it on there. Hold on.
The Socialists Must Reclaim Halloween one was the other one we decided for this week.
Right.
It's I think from the Jacobin, but I could be wrong.
No, I think you're right. I forgot that. Anyway, let me read a little bit of this first before I put it in.
Yeah.
Happy Halloween, comrades. We'd like to issue the following public service announcement. Please be careful in trick-or-treating, dressing up, and associating with ghosts and ghouls this holiday. We have been warned that Marxist theory may be hidden in your child's chocolate bar, and that your unsuspecting friends' costumes may include subliminal messages displaying communist sympathies. Please stay safe, keep your eyes peeled, and if you feel at all tempted or drawn into the leftism on display this Halloween, report to your local UDSA chapter. That doesn't sound like cult.
Honestly, I think this is them trying to parody the Red Scare mentality. And the weird thing is, they kind of tried to have it both ways, because they opened with Happy Halloween, comrades, which gives away their, socialist or Marxist sympathies. And don't get me wrong, the Red Scare purity spiraling family values types are insufferable as shit. See also my opening statement with, calling out either variety of moralistic fuckery. But as annoying as the Red Scarers might be, the Reds certainly give them a run for their money. Because they do the same bullshit. The bullshit of, we can't justify celebrating this holiday unless it has been ideologically and morally purified to our standard. Because God forbid anything good about the world or about society should come from somewhere other than a purity spiral. Dirt.
Oh, it was Socialists Must Reclaim Halloween, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We opted for this week to be a anti-SJW / anti-communist / socialist week. We will get more into the aforementioned Bible thumpers in the next episode.
Yeah. To be fair, I wanted us to start off a little more happy, so that's why a lot of articles after the first two are going to be like very
optimistic.
Yeah. Because it's Halloween, motherfucker. I'd rather not be depressed on Halloween.
Honestly, I enjoy kicking the shit out of these moralistic arguments every year, and
I'm not saying
it does sometimes frustrate me that it does happen literally every year.
Hello, Giant Turtle. Good to see you. I'm doing pretty well. Still haven't. Sorry, man. I've been swamped, so I haven't been able to read Worm or anything.
I haven't read much of Pact either, just because now that we are finally in that glorious, glorious October country, I am adding the books that I normally read around Halloween to the rotation. Like I started Needful Things finally today.
All right. Okay. Bracing Red Scare. And the activist editorial board has compiled a guide to understanding the socialist theory on display in the Monsters and Spirits of Halloween. Okay, fuck you. Now.
Yeah, again, to whomever moralistic authoritarians it may concern, Halloween is a borderline human universal and belongs to nobody's ideological purity spiral. You can go fuck yourself. And it's particularly funny to see a Marxist try and make such a thing work because, well, Marxism is usually very much about historical materialism borrowed from Hegel, which means that they vehemently despise the supernatural for whatever fucking reason.
Mm-hmm. Hold on.
Yep.
Witches as resistors. Federici's feminist socialism. Witch hunts have come to be understood as devices of the patriarchy used to condemn, torture, and brutally murder women who resisted misogynistic oppression. Silvia Federici, a feminist Marxist scholar, has written extensively about witch hunting in medieval Europe as a specifically capitalist venture that sought to dispossess women of any power over their labor.
Oh my god. We're double dipping here. I didn't read the text of the article, I just went from the title.
Yeah,
but apparently we're already getting into post-feminist recontextualization of the witch trials. Okay, first of all, capitalism in the broadest possible sense has predated the witch trials by several thousand years, if we're talking about the exchange of goods for currency as opposed to other goods. Like, if we differentiate, representative currency from barter, and that is the main fixture of capitalism. Capitalism has existed for fucking ever, but that's neither here nor there. I would argue that at least the beginnings of capitalism are even in the barter system to some degree, but that's neither here nor there. The thing I'm currently zeroing in on is the constant need to appropriate my spirituality for bullshit ahistorical reasons. But just in case we need to go through this again, the ratios of all of the witch trials, roughly, the ones we have actual documentation for, split the genders around a 60-40 split, i.e. 60% women to 40% men. That is not in any way a lion's share amount of people that were women.
Oh, hey, sorry, I forgot to mention this earlier. Just because it feels like given. Sorry, a bit off topic, but I just remembered it. The voice actor who played Oogie Boogie in Nightmare Before Christmas, Ken Page, unfortunately passed away on September 30th this year.
Well, fuck me running. That's
yeah. I felt it would have been a disservice, obviously, for the month and the kind of big cultural impact that character and the movie itself did have. So I just felt like it was needed to be said. I didn't mean to cut you off, though. I apologize for that.
Yeah, but Ken Page's excellent performances and voice work notwithstanding, back to the point. If you actually examine the witch trials in the, documents and church records or court records and things we actually have, one, the ratio of gender stands at a ratio of 60-40, i.e. there's only about 20% more women accused of witchcraft than men. Secondly, there are other types of sorcery trials during the Burning Times, and most of the other varieties of sorcery usually just referred to as either sorcery or sometimes alluded to in a specialist way, the two most common, of course, being werewolfism and vampirism. They were all predominantly dominated by men. And even witchcraft, which it does have a feminine slant to it, has a feminine slant to it not because of historical misogyny or derp. It's related to how the church and the legal system at large understood witchcraft or maleficia in this sense. One, witchcraft was viewed as an extension of the sin of lust. Specifically in the Malleus Maleficarum, it says, and I quote, all witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is in women insatiable. But that's not because we hate the women's. It is because in the spiritual conceptualization of the Middle Ages, the human soul was said to have a thing called the generative impulse. And women were said to have the stronger one because women are the ones who carry the children. The issue, morally speaking, from the church's point of view, apart from, medieval worship, blah, blah, was the misuse of one's generative impulse. Secondly, one of the reasons why women are overrepresented in witch trials was because they were thought to be more spiritually pure than men, and therefore more prone to being corrupted than men. And of course, fourthly, I'm going to have to bring up the etymological aspect of this again, because this will never cease to fucking amaze me how people can contrive misogyny out of something that was, frankly, full tilt misanthropic, period. But getting into the etymology thing that I bring up every year when this happens. The word witch comes from the Anglo-Saxon word wisha or wicca, which means craft of the wise. The word warlock comes from an Anglo-Saxon word which means traitor or oath breaker. The reason being, in the medieval mind, when witch trials happened, or the early modern mind when witch trials happened, the reason why women were often overrepresented was because they were thought to be more innocent and morally pure, and therefore, most of the time, according to the witch trial records we actually have, the logic was she didn't know what she was doing when she signed away her soul to the devil. She was obviously tricked into it by either the devil himself, who, of course, in the mythology of Christianity is a male agent, or often by other male practitioners, which of course leads me back to the etymology. The reason why witches still got to be called wise in the parlance of the time, while men were referred to as oath breakers, which is one of the single worst things you could possibly be accused of in the medieval and early modern period, was because, according to the church's bullshit and or the court's bullshit reasoning, when women were tricked into signing away their soul, they obviously were too innocent and too pure to actually do it willingly, and therefore they should get off easier, sentencing-wise. Whereas men were thought to be entirely possessed of their agency, and therefore, if a man of Christendom signed away his soul to the devil, which is how the church thought this worked, it was because he willingly made the choice to betray his oath to God in baptism. And that's why warlocks are called warlocks, because it means oath breaker. And here's the real world way in which this manifested itself. Just like in the modern age, where men are disproportionately given harsher sentences for the same alleged crimes, this also happened in the medieval and early modern period, whereby, usually when men were accused, they were accused to be the leaders of the covens or cabals of witches that they were allegedly leading, and therefore they frequently got harsher sentencing than women for the alleged same crime of either diabolatry or maleficia, depending on which version of this we're going with. But the other aspect of this is women frequently got off from execution by getting pregnant. I.e., there are many cases where a woman got pregnant and therefore they would stay her execution until the baby was born because they didn't want to corrupt an innocent soul. And moreover, frequently when women were executed for witchcraft, they were executed in the hopes that by punishing them severely in this life, they could be free in the next one. And you may make the argument that that is a nonsensical reason to kill somebody, which it very much is, but the one thing it definitely is not is misogynistic. Because even while these women were allegedly worshipping the devil or partnering with the devil, depending on how you look at it, they were still viewed as pure victims, innocent, naive, obviously tricked pawns, or as someone we need to spiritually save. No such waffling language was ever used in relation to a man who was accused of maleficia or diabolatry. Never. Or almost never. Obviously, I haven't seen every single document of every single witch trial. But usually when women were executed, they were executed in the hopes of saving their souls.
Hey,
When men were executed, they were executed because
Don.
people hate men. Anyway, moving on. But, yeah, short version, feminism has absolutely jack shit nothing to do with the rationales for the witch trials. Neither does capitalism. These are bass-backward spiritual beliefs from the Middle Ages and early modern period, and you need to stop removing them from that context. Moving forward.
Mm-hmm. During the transition between a feudal and capitalist economy, women who refused to conform to their newly imposed role as mere vehicles of reproduction confined to the domestic sphere were seen as threats. In order for capitalism to be successful, the realms of reproduction, i.e. population growth, and production, i.e. material goods, capital, had to be separated just as workers had to be from the products of their labor. Women who provided services related to abortion, contraception, and birthing were frequently deemed witches because they threatened men's control over their wives as reproductive devices.
For the love of fuck.
Oh wait,
That
no,
is
hold on. Let me finish the last. Federici compares women's bodies to factories, both sites of exploitation in this patriarchal capitalist system. This is no less relevant today in the wake of Roe v. Wade's upheaval and amidst the anti-trans legislation being passed by fundamentalists. This Halloween, embrace your witchy, feminist, queer, anti-capitalist selves.
Okay. You people are possibly the most pig-ignorant, uneducated cunts I have ever dealt with. And I am speaking, by the way, as a modern-day magic practitioner. I have studied and practiced magic in various forms for 18 bastarding years, which is pretty much my entire adult life. I am 29, and for 18 of those 29 years, I have been a magical practitioner. And in addition to being a magic practitioner, I am the sort of person who delves deeply into the history of things that are relevant to his, concerns. Which means that, not to toot my own horn here, but this is one of my particular areas of special interest. Getting on to the bullshit that you just ejaculated, containing the most stupid of any sentences I've ever dealt with, is one, in the medieval period, and for a considerable time before the medieval period, the home was the primary economic unit. The main industries the average household got up to were domestic in nature. The manufacture of food goods, or clothing, or herbal tinctures, etc., etc., etc. For a large percentage of the population of any given country, for most of human existence, the most important economic unit was the economic unit of the domestic sphere, because many of the most important industries were cottage industries, literal cottage industries. And midwives were not accused because it interferes with our tendency for patriarchal dominance bullshit. It was considered that midwives and other folk healers were liable to be the most likely candidates for witchcraft, because the logic went, if you know how to heal with herbs, potions, etc., then you would also, in theory, know what formulas of same would be harmful to someone, and therefore you were almost as likely to do good or ill. So when something bullshit happened, it was likely that the person who knew things about brewing and healing and midwifery were likely to blame. Now, mind you, this was at a time when infant death was very highly common, and or death in childbirth was also very, very common. So this was a serious issue for most people. The second point I would like to fucking bring up to dispel this rumor once and for fucking all is we are taught in elementary school that the witch trials happened to people who never had anything to do with witchcraft ever or magic ever, and people were erroneously accused for no good reason. This is true at least some of the time, particularly in the latter parts of the witch trials. But very often, there were actual practitioners involved in these things. The village wise woman, i.e. witch, or the village cunning man, were definitely occupations at the time. The academic study of magic as a component of theology, or as a component of the sciences, was also very prevalent at this time. While there were many people who had no knowledge of witchcraft whatsoever, or magic whatsoever, that were accused, again, especially in the latter parts of these witch trials, after the hysteria had gotten going and run out of actual likely candidates, there were people who had nothing to do with anything accused. But for a large part of Europe and or the Americas, there were actual village witches or cunning men that did actually do this thing called witchcraft. Now, mind you, the historical actual practitioners of witchcraft had almost nothing in common with the church's definition of maleficia, i.e., pacts with the devil or some other spiritual agent that wasn't divine, and or the use of one's generative impulse as an extension of the sin of lust as a power source for magic. Even though actual historical witchcraft had very little in common with the church's definition of witchcraft, there were actual practitioners who were accused, and several of them just straight up admitted that they were, in fact, witches or cunning men, depending. So we need to get past this. No one who was ever accused of witchcraft actually did the things they were accused of by the, two competing definitions of that word at the time. The only time the completely unaffiliated were accused of witchcraft was after the trials had gotten so hysterical and out of hand, and by the way, they also probably ran out of actual practitioners very, very quickly. Only after all of the, to put it in as charitable a definition as possible, only after all of the legitimate candidates, you could, in air quotes, had already been either been exonerated, usually by having a rich supporter or rich friend vouch for them, or by just simply actually defending themselves, which that was a thing that sometimes happened in witch trials. For example, this is a funny example that me and Brainstormer actually made use of in the Lionhearted universe. There was a werewolfism trial where a guy got himself exonerated by saying that, oh no, I can see why you're confused, but you see, I am not one of those horrible heathens using diabolical magic to transform into a wolf. I am using divine sorcery in order to do so, to become a hound of God, whereupon me and my cohorts go into hell and fight demons in spiritual wolf form.
And again, I'm going to say this just simply because if someone tells the truth like that, or tells something like that with absolute sincerity and seriousness in a trial, like, you're admitting that you're a supernatural being, right?
Yeah. But his gambit was basically, but I'm on the good side, so it's okay, lol. Which, speaking of like elementary school level misconceptions that we need to dispel about the witch trials thing, there was a notion of beneficial, natural, or divine magic in the Middle Ages. A lot of times, again, in that sort of elementary school level, 101 way, a lot of people assume that any admittance of magic at all was tantamount to a witchcraft accusation. But the thing is, protective magic, divine magic, natural magic, or just general, like, non-malefic magic was definitely a thing in the Middle Ages and early modern period. The term that we now translate as witchcraft is usually either maleficia, which is the closest to what most people think of as witchcraft, or diabolatry, which usually translates more accurately to sorcery. My point being, it wasn't enough for someone to be guilty of using magic full stop to get you a witchcraft accusation. Unless, and again, the witch trials had already ran out of legitimate practitioners and had started swinging for the fences, so to speak. But yeah, there was plenty of magical practices that were not only well known and commonplace, but generally viewed as benevolent, that didn't trigger a witchcraft accusation unless the community at large had some other bone to pick with you, or that the hysteria had already gotten so out of hand that people stopped drawing the distinction between benevolent practitioner and non-benevolent practitioner. But the point being, at least on paper, in order to levy a witchcraft accusation, you had to have at least some indication of a malefic use, i.e. a non-benign use of magic, to get someone in on a witchcraft accusation. And there are plenty of cases, like the Hound of God example, where someone literally just went, no, here's the spell I'm using, here is the intended effect I was hoping to have. My magic had nothing to do with this negative repercussion. Because usually what started off a witchcraft accusation was something negative had happened in a quote-unquote unnatural seeming way, and someone thought that sorcery or maleficia was to blame. Anyway, moving on, because we've already spent so much time on this. But this is my wheelhouse, so it annoys me when they try to, like, post-feminist Hegelian bullshit their way out of actual history. Moving on.
Alright. The capitalist in Dracula. The notorious Count Dracula was originally inspired by Vlad the Impaler, a 15th century Wallachian aristocrat. However, the modern story we retell is much more tied to the financialization and industrialization of 19th century Europe than any royal or aristocratic precedent. Dracula, although account, is frugal and accumulative. The Italian literary critic Franco Moretti argues that in the dialectic of fear, that in seeking constant survival, not enjoyment, through the exploitation of others' livelihood, Dracula embodies capitalist impulses of self-perpetuation without reason, expenditure, or outlet. A twisted asceticism described in Max Weber's Protestant work ethic.
What in the fuck? Again, because I am, the guy who knows all this shit quite well, in fact, I'm going to point out a few very significant details here. One, the vampire mythos that Bram Stoker drawed on was explicitly in a folkloric or supernatural context. It had nothing to do with aristocratic parasitism. In fact, most of the characters who end up thwarting Dracula are aristocrats or high-level professionals from England. If there can be said to be any aristocratic commentary, and again, I'm going to stress the aristocratic in that sentence, i.e., not capitalistic, but feudal. But point being, if there is to be said to be any commentary on aristocracy in Dracula, which it's a stretch to even entertain this line of thinking to begin with, the commentary, if there is any, is the commentary of the mistrust of foreign countries or foreign aristocrats as opposed to our good old-fashioned homegrown English or Anglosphere ones. Secondly, Bram Stoker was not some fucking Ebenezer Scrooge analog counting his money or some dispossessed member of the poor trying to make a point about the evils of money or some shit. The original basis for Bram Stoker creating Dracula as he did was because he was a member of the goddamn Golden Dawn. He was a member of a magical order, a very famous one, in the 1890s. And as such, he was very fascinated by the ideas of magic and folklore, particularly from Eastern Europe. It was in the research of this that he came up with what we would think of as the modern vampire mythos. Most of the qualities that he gives to his version of Count Dracula are borrowed from long-standing, pre-existing medieval Eastern European folklore. Secondly, and this is why, and I'm bringing this up because of the whole feminist rigmarole in the witch section just now. Dracula only was half inspired by Vlad Tepes Dracula. The other person who inspired Count Dracula, and the entire reason why he is given the title of Count rather than Prince, which was the historical Dracula's title. He was the prince of what is now Romania, particularly the part of Romania that crosses between Transylvania, as everyone knows, and Wallachia. But point being, the other person who inspired Count Dracula was Elizabeth Bathory, Countess Elizabeth Bathory, otherwise known as the Blood Countess, because she was so obsessed with maintaining her youthful femininity and beauty that she drained the blood of youthful peasant girls and bathed in it, or at least used it as some kind of medieval equivalent of a face cream, essentially. And it did work because of the nutritive qualities of some blood, which is another issue entirely. But point being, one of the antecedents or inspirations for Count Dracula was a woman exhibiting the most narcissistic toxically feminine attitude you could literally think of. She was so evil that not only did she inspire, partially, Count Dracula, she also may have been one of the inspirations for Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm's evil queen from Snow White. And if that shit ain't toxic femininity, I don't know what is. Moving on.
Alright. In Stoker's text, Jonathan Harker notices that Dracula's castle is entirely bare of opulence, furniture, servants, bare except for massive piles of coins and gold. This wealth prompts the whole of the novel, as Jonathan is tasked with establishing Dracula's trust and wealth transfer to London. Blood-sucking and exploitation have left Dracula enormously wealthy and powerful, but without friends, culture, or meaning beyond the continuous act of gross accumulation. He's a fucking
My
immortal
friend.
vampire. Why the okay, whatever.
No, go ahead. You do
He's an
yours and then I'll
immortal-
do mine.
He's an immortal fucking vampire. What need does he have of wealth?
Yeah, and again, if you actually take off the historical reinterpretation goggles that you seem to have glued to your face, and actually look at the things in the context that they were actually written in and around, you would know that one of the reasons why Jonathan Harker finds Dracula's lack of, style or display unusual or unsettling is because, again, if there is any commentary on aristocracy in Bram Stoker's Dracula, it is specifically highlighting the differences in mentality and the difference in etiquette and style of a Eastern European or Romanian aristocrat and that of an English aristocrat or the Western European approach to aristocracy, because at the time quite a lot of this was borrowed more from France than from England. But point being, the reason why Dracula's lack of expenditure or lack of opulence is denoted upon in Bram Stoker's novel is because it is informing the reader from mostly Western Europe, that unlike the good old-fashioned homegrown English and French aristocrats, Dracula is unsettling and unnatural because he hoards large amounts of currency rather than spending it on the signifiers of opulence that you would get from a more Western European aristocrat. And this is specifically commented on again because one of the things that Dracula wants Jonathan Harker to do for him is teach him how the English operate and carry themselves as aristocrats. Because one of the things that Dracula wants from Jonathan Harker is to convey to him how one fits in with the English aristocracy and how that's different from his own country's or his own era's displays of opulence. And if, again, this is another case of if you actually read the novel at all, but if you particularly read the novel with the context of who wrote it, why they wrote it, and what they were attempting to get at with it, you would have known this. And you would have known that Dracula is not a capitalist or anti-capitalist novel. It is a commentary on the differing nature of aristocracy in various different cultures, and or the excesses or Gothic nature of the feudal system in general. That's about as far or as close to Marxist interpretation of history you could possibly get. But even that would be a bit of a stretch, because again, Bram Stoker was a poet who believed very heavily in not only the supernatural, but in folklore, and deliberately based most of his novel on said folklore, or magical information that he got from his membership in the Golden Dawn. Moving on.
Right. Marx too invokes the metaphor of the vampire in Capital. He writes, "Capital is dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. The undead threat of capital outlives any individual human, instead a permanent process and system of accumulation that requires constant new blood and sacrifice of humanity for its continuation."
Okay, and again, I'm going to play that game where I remind you that the novel actually is a thing that exists. Because, as most people who are even vaguely familiar with the novel or the Bela Lugosi movie are aware of, in Dracula, as well as the esoteric fields that Bram Stoker frequented, or the Eastern European folklore he was referencing, blood is synonymous with the life force. They don't suck labor, you cunt. They suck life. They suck vitality. They suck what the Chinese would refer to as qi, the Romans would refer to as spiritus vital, the Buddhists and Hindus would refer to as prana, etc., ad nauseum, or what Mesmer occasionally referred to as animal magnetism. That is what the blood is very explicitly told it means and what metaphysical effect it is hoping to have. The fact that you can only see life in terms of labor is a blind spot that you have because you've been too high on Marx or neo-Hegelianism in general. But if you actually, again, look at it in the context it was written and the things that informed it, or informed its author at any rate, you would know that this is specifically a supernatural effect we are dealing with. It's supposed to actually exist not only in the novel, but also in the parlance of the reader for the most part, because again, Bram Stoker was a very much believer in much of this mysticism and folklore because he was a member of, and a member in very high standing of, the Golden Dawn, one of the most preeminent magical societies of the 19th century. And if you refuse to acknowledge how this or the folklore that Bram Stoker explicitly researched to make this novel work, if you refuse to acknowledge any of those things, then your opinion is frankly moot, i.e., there is nothing respectable about it. Moving on.
Alright, the vampire hunters in Dracula, despite their fight against the capitalist vampire, are not socialist revolutionaries. Already lays out the case that their opposition is rooted in mixed ideologies of traditionalism, British nationalism, and inter-capitalist competition for ownership of land and political power. The cast of characters is made up of British aristocrats, a wealthy Texan adventure seeker, and a financier. Socialists must build their own opposition to both parties of capital and aristocracy. This Halloween, discover what it means to be an anti-capitalist vampire hunter.
Okay.
Jesus.
You almost, just barely, had the beginnings of a semi-intelligent thing to say, but you shot yourself in the foot by defaulting back to capitalism bad. Because if you actually had, engaged with the material instead of projecting all sorts of materialist bullshit onto the material that is very clearly supernatural, paranormal, and non-materialistic, you would know that most of the social commentary, if there can be said to be any, is a commentary on the feudal and aristocratic system that has nothing whatsoever to do with capitalism, except for the fact that if we define capitalism as the exchange for symbolic currency rather than barter, capitalism has existed for about as long as humans have existed. But if you define capitalism by its modern, like, post-Adam Smith leanings, capitalism as a thing really isn't a force in the zeitgeist of the 19th century novel that we're dealing with here. You would have to look at Gothic Romanticism, or just the Byronic heroes and things of that nature. People like Edgar Allan Poe. people like Bram Stoker, people like Lord Byron, etc. That is, at most, if you want a literary rather than, literal or metaphysical interpretation, which is the way I tend to lean, because I know that Bram Stoker was a folklore fanatic who was also a member of the Golden Dawn. But if you needed a snobby English lit bullshit explanation of Dracula that doesn't take into account the metaphysics or mechanics that Bram Stoker very evidently believed in and worked into the novel, the commentary, if there can be said to be any, is one on feudalism or the post Napoleonic or Georgian period of what remained of the aristocracy, because obviously the aristocracy had lost quite a lot of its power due to the existence of things like Parliament, but we can't even get to the criticizing aristocrat part because you're so blinded by your post-Hegelian interpretation of every fucking thing and projecting physicalism and materialism on a book that very evidently is not part of that tradition. Moving on.
All right. Frankenstein of Proletariat.
What?
Frankenstein's creature, a flesh amalgam so abominable its creator found it necessary to prosecute it upon birth. Dr. Victor Frankenstein, a bona fide grave-digging bourgeois anatomist, thank you, who, of course, is the one who would construct his unfortunate namesake. David McNally, in his Monsters of the Market, locates this monstrous relationship within British working-class history. For capitalist relations to develop, they must disintegrate customary ties between peoples, while at the same transfiguring social relations at a human cost. As market relations developed in Britain, so did the criminally poor. Criminals of infinitesimally petty theft earned hanging at gallows in droves. Their lifeless bodies were bought by hungry Enlightenment anatomists. In their craze, not even final resting places were honored as this corpse economy began to emerge. It's this configuration that Frankenstein was written against. Mary Shelley grew up within earshot of the gallows and was a frequent visitor of her mother's grave throughout her life. The fuck?
Okay. One, Mary Shelley was inspired by, if anything, the modern scientific humanism and its relation to anatomy. She attended many, many medical lectures in her spare time, and several of which actually used electric shock to demonstrate that corpses could be made to convulse even after death, which is likely one of the inspirations not only for her work but also for the inclusion of the lightning strike in the 1940s movie that people more often are familiar with than the novel. Now, again, trying to see this through the bullshit everything must be interpreted as English lit lens, because I prefer the things should be taken in their own terms and as literally and in universe wise as possible. But even trying to meet you halfway in the pompous, snobby English lit everything is my themes and my interpretation bullshit perspective, there are two different vectors you can look at Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, which is the novel's full title, through. One is the scientific humanist lens of scientists should be careful not to play God or to extend their bounds beyond what is feasible within natural law. That is the interpretation that pretty much everyone knows, because that's the one that Mary Shelley was probably most explicitly utilizing when she did it. There is another, however, which I always find to be the more interesting one, which is the commentary on the failings of human nature side of things. i.e., if you actually read the novel, you will notice that at one point before making the creature, Victor Frankenstein basically sets out his goal to be creating the perfect being without the need of the intervention of God. And the interesting thing here, and the part of Frankenstein that I find to be more interesting than the playing God scientific humanist angle, is the fact that Victor Frankenstein set out to create the perfect creature, or the perfect being, and for the most part, he succeeded. He did actually create a being who was as strong, as smart, as soulful, as poetic, as sort of pseudo-romantic and Byronic as he wanted to create. But the thing is, because said creature was made out of a patchwork of corpses, Victor Frankenstein himself could not bring himself to see beyond the ugliness of the creature, which is the part of the scenario that is mostly his fault, i.e., if you wanted the creature to be beautiful, Victor, why did you, not endeavor to make it look better going in? But point being, the interesting part of Frankenstein, for me at least, is the commentary on human nature and the focus on the soulful tragedy of the creature himself. Because even though Victor Frankenstein set out his goals to create essentially the most perfect, humanist definition of the perfect being as he could, not only did he succeed, but the reason why the monster becomes a monster thereafter is not because he doesn't have the soul that the Victorian clerical reader would have denoted his problem as being. It's not because the creature doesn't have a soul or isn't highly intelligent, highly empathetic, highly creative, and highly, just generally, to use an anachronistic word, eugenically perfect. That's not the reason the monster becomes a monster. The reason the monster becomes a monster is because its own father couldn't look past the ugliness of his own handiwork to realize that despite how the creature looks on the outside, he succeeded on creating the perfect being on the inside. And this tragedy is compounded because not only does his own father shun him, but so do most other people. Again, not because the creature has any moral wrongs within him, but because many people could not look past his corpse exterior to see the poetic, intellectual, and humane soul within him, and as a result, the creature's better nature finds no purchase in the world, i.e., he comes into the world basically flawless and perfect, with the exception of his exterior, but he is broken and twisted by people's own callousness and refusal to look past the surface. That is the part of the story that I find the most interesting. But neither of these have anything whatsoever to do with Frankenstein. Or, neither of these has anything whatsoever to do with your Marxist interpretation, Herder der Malleber. Because even if we trace the Frankenstein novel back to its inspiration, which is a pre-existing medieval story about an alchemist trying to create a homunculus, even if we drill back to that leads me back into the interpreting its metaphysics and its supernatural overtones through the lens that people actually would have seen it at the time. But yeah, even if we go that far back and that far distant from Mary Shelley's explicit scientific humanist leanings, you're still treading water vis-a-vis a materialist examination, because there's nothing materialist in Frankenstein outside of the scientific humanism aspect that Mary Shelley explicitly appended of her own will, because she took a explicitly mystical supernatural story and peppered it throughout with scientific humanist leanings. So if we're taking the author's intentions into account, or at least the most overt of the author's intentions into account, you probably should view this in a post-Enlightenment rationalist or humanist perspective. But if you take every aspect of the themes, quote unquote, into account, the interesting part of the story is the tragedy of a perfect being being twisted into a monster because people were too callous and stupid to look past the surface and see the soul within. Moving on.
Alright, Where was that? Oh, okay. In addition, Shelley's parents and lover were all literary radicals. The Jacobins, Luddites, and Irish rebels inspired Shelley's writings. The psychos of the psychosis, no, anyway, psychosis of the Doctor and his creature are in fact a microcosm of our fractured society. The great alienating pain that Victor feels after the death of his mother eventually motivates his robbery of human graves and meshing the remains with animal parts. The clarion call of wealth and individual accomplishment distorts Victor's personality into something monstrous. In the end, what he creates is a hideous conglomeration of bodies whose birth he flees from. The creature's pleas for social connection and the recognition of commonality are curbed at every step by its creator in a relationship of intensifying violence, a dialectic of monstrosity, violence, and oppression.
Okay, you almost had a semi-intelligent thing to say there. Yes, it is the trauma of being neglected by everyone, including its own father, that drives this otherwise perfect, again, kind of semi-eugenicist being into being the monster that its society made it. But because you added my oppression and my Marxist materialism and my psychology on top of it, what, again, I would define as the most meaningful part of the novel has been buried under layers upon layers upon layers of bullshit that makes no sense to even include, because Mary Shelley was working with a post-Gothic romantic sensibility and or a scientific humanist sensibility, either of which would at least be more valid vectors to pursue the story from. And yes, you could even go so far as to focus in on the tragedy of a being created to be perfect, and in fact mostly succeeding in being perfect, being broken and twisted into a monster by the virtue of humanity's own callous, dismissive hubris. But even that, which you do somewhat allude to, gets buried under 47 layers of wrong because you keep projecting Marxist theory of labor onto something that does not include it, ever. Moving on.
However, we can't forget how the story of Frankenstein ends. Victor Frankenstein seeks out the Arctic to finally escape his creation, yet finds himself dying on a ship, almost facing calamity. On the course to the North Pole, conditions begin to dramatically worsen, and Victor catches a fatal case of pneumonia. When the sailors' pleas to reverse course go unheard by the captain, the crew threatens mutiny. He is forced to acquiesce in the face of this collective strength. McNally interprets this aversion to social disaster as a promotion of class compromise. However, in a world marred by increasing violence and global disaster, our answer must be democratic, collective action to immediately change course.
Okay, again, why are you projecting 2023's values onto a novel that was written in the 19th century? The reason being, I think, is because that is literally the only lens you know how to see things through, because you don't actually have any sort of intellectual erudition or literary bona fides of any kind. You just think that neo-Hegelianism, or more specifically Marxism, if you absolutely must, is the only valid way to interpret things through, and without it you're quote-unquote media illiterate. When in actuality, it is you who is more media illiterate, because you try to use this one neo-Hegelian hammer of yours on everything that remotely looks like a nail. When in actuality, you should be asking yourself the question of, okay, what inspired Frankenstein, which would lead you to medieval alchemy, or what intellectual purviews was the author operating in and or trying to zero in on, which would lead you to scientific humanism or Gothic romanticism, depending, or what actual meaning is there in the text, which would lead you to the tragedy of someone trying to create a perfect being, succeeding in doing so, and then refusing to be able to look past the surface and see the fact that the perfect being that he wanted was there all along, had he just been a halfway decent father. But, that's by the way. All of these are more legitimate ways to see this particular story if you absolutely must do literary interpretationalism bullshit. But you didn't do any of them because you, for some reason, think that the only sane or like intellectual thing that was ever said was said by a German school dropout who literally died in his own filth. Moving on.
Right. Okay. So the next one is from the Jacobin.com. Actually, hold on. Alright, so Giant Turtle said some stuff. I'm just now seeing that. Sorry. Well, no, I saw it, but I wanted to get through that article.
Yeah, we were in the middle of the process.
Okay.
Sorry.
The Witch's Hammer was IIRC dismissed as the theological equivalent of pseudoscience by the Catholic Church. I don't remember the Eastern one supporting it either.
Eventually,
Yeah.
But for the 2 or 3 centuries that comprise the Burning Times, it was the Witch Hunter's Manual. Yes, the church did eventually disavow it, but only really after all of the use had been done of it. And that doesn't prevent all the Protestant sects taking the thing up, which of course they also did. But I understand your need to defend Catholicism from this, but I don't think that the modern day Catholic Church is guilty of the things that the Inquisition or the Burning Times were doing. The people who actually did it are the ones who are responsible for doing it. But that doesn't mean that those people don't exist.
Leftist capitalism caused the witch burnings, which probably affected trans black slaves most of all.
Yeah, the elementary school level understanding most people have of the witch trials are bad enough, and then layering in all this Frankfurt School bullshit on top of it, it makes every part of me want to see these people's blood boiled. Because, both historically as a, area of special interest of mine, and as an actual practitioner of magic, the sheer just post hoc, projecting of everyone else's issues except for the issues that actually existed at the time really fucking pissed me off. And it infuriates me even more because the witch trial the witch trials were very thoroughly documented, either in personal diaries of the people involved, in the publications at the time that were used to regulate said witch trials, and in the freaking court documents. I could understand this postmodern recontextualization if we had literally nothing historical to go on, but the Burning Times happened right around the time that the printing press was gaining steam, and literacy was definitely on the rise. So we have the personal diaries of the people who judged the witch trials. We have the court documentation of the people, the actual trials themselves in a lot of cases. And we have the theory and frameworks that inspired said witch trials because, those books were some of the first actually to be published by the printing press. So, the sheer refusal to, or rather the sheer need to look at every perspective except for the people who were actually involved and the reasons they say they did it, just baffles me entirely.
Alright,
Moving on.
alright, so dude, I'm not defending the medieval church. They sold indulgences and sucking IRC. Once Pope swore to pagan gods while gambling. Calling it pious and pure would be a mixed bag at best.
Right, and that's fair enough. I just wanted to clarify that during the Burning Times, books like the Compendium Maleficarum by Francesco Maria Guerzo or the Malleus Maleficarum by Jacob Springer and Heinrich Kramer, one of the most bloodstained books in all of human history, were very much in use until after the witch trials were winding down and mostly over, and only then did the disavowals happen, which tends to be the way it happens all the time. For example, the church didn't apologize for persecuting Galileo until 300 some years after he died. So, and again, I'm not having a go at Catholicism for that. In fact, most of the medieval grimoires that we have were kept by Catholic scribes. There's a reason why most medieval grimoires have at least some deference to Catholic ritual structure. So, if anything, Catholicism is one of the most sympathetic variations of Christianity that I'm aware of. That being said, they are frequently a day late and a dollar short when it comes to decrying the torture of innocence. So there's that. But moving on.
All right. Okay. So this is from This is what we were discussing earlier that I grabbed because I forgot to put it on. It's from Jacobin.com. Originally, Socialists Must Reclaim Halloween. It's written by China Mayville. If I'm saying that name wrong, I'm sorry.
In short, my thesis statement is going to be no. And just like I often say to the religious fundamentalists when they try to play this, we need to claim everything good as ours bullshit. You need to grow up enough. You need to intellectually mature enough to be okay with the fact that your perspective, your ideology, your moral worldview, or whatever the fuck you want to put it, is not the source of every good thing in existence. You need to come to terms with the fact that some of the good things in life are going to come out of things other than your perspective. And the only thing you do by trying to reclaim these things is show yourself to be so myopically small-minded that you literally can't cope with the idea that the world contains more good things in it than your ideology can account for. Because frankly, in a sane world, we should all be very grateful that the world contains more good things in it than any one perspective or one ideology can account for. But because some people prioritize the sacredness of their ideology over actually being able to enjoy life and or themselves, some people will literally throw every baby out with every ounce of bathwater just because they need all good things to come from their one perspective, somehow. Moving on.
China Mayville On Gothic Marxism, the right's strange appropriation of trick-or-treating and socialist historic defense of the flagrantly imaginary. The socialist fantasy writer China Mayville is no stranger to the macabre or surreal. As proponent of Gothic Marxism, he rejects more than just capitalist exploitation. He also stands strong against the disenchantment of the world inherent under capitalism.
Okay, this is where I'm going to.
Before?
I don't think so. To the best of my recollection, no. There were a couple that I knew we did before, like the feminist socialist Halloween one. That's why I didn't include it in the list of ones to do. But I don't think we've done this specific one. I think there are other Jacobin articles that are similar to this. But I don't think we've done China Mayville before.
Okay, I didn't know. It seemed familiar.
It does feel familiar. I think there was one that was like how trick-or-treating can show us how to operate in a post-capitalist world or something like that. But back to actually addressing the article. Typically, it's Marxists that are or other neo-Hegelians that are constantly insisting on reducing everything down to material conditions. So while I commend you for being smarter than your fellow comrades, my dear, trying to be Gothic and Marxist at the same time is one of the greatest oxymorons in the history of the world. And
it's a guy.
Go ahead. That's so weird to me. China sounds like a girl's name. Well, of course, first it sounded like a country's name, but assuming that I wanted to name my child after that particular country, I would probably name a girl after it rather than a guy. But anyway, point being, it's not usually capitalism that is synonymous with demystification, the hatred of the supernatural, and the like strict materialism and nihilism of like modern times. The whole reason that modern art and modern architecture are so sleek and barren as they are is because a bunch of Frankfurt School fuckwits thought that Art Deco, Surrealism, Gothic architecture, and so on were decadent frills of a overly spiritual or overly non-materialist past, and that we can only live in the modern age if we strip things down to their barest essential functions. A point, by the way, I fucking vehemently disagree with, because there's a reason why modern art is so incomprehensibly shit now, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, usually it's the Marxist or other neo-Hegelians wanting to strip things down to their materialistic functions, not the capitalists. Frankly, capitalism doesn't really care one way or the other as long as the money is rolling in, and it used to be the case that it focused on whether or not its customers were at least satisfied with its product, but thanks to the meddling of aforementioned neo-Hegelians, that mentality appears to be all but dead, because you convinced the allegedly capitalist class that pleasing your customer, or at least satisfying them, is a moral sin that we should all be ashamed of and should fight at every turn. Moving on.
Yep. It should come as no surprise then that he is a fan of Halloween. In this talk, originally delivered at the 2013 Socialism Conference, he argues that socialists cannot abandon Halloween to the right. Reactionary ghouls may praise the holiday as living proof of humanity's greedy self-interest, and some socialists, like late Hugo Chavez, may dismiss it as a pageant of imperialist terror. But for Mayville, Halloween is a source of the imaginative ammunition necessary for socialist politics. A celebration.
Okay, see.
Hold on. A celebration of the chaotic social over the orderly individual, an intuitive solidarity with those called monsters, with a principled refusal to be afraid of the dark. Okay.
Are you trying to say that individualism has nothing to do with Halloween?
What?
Because
That's the end of that article.
okay, that's ridiculously stupid and short. But anyway, are you trying to say that Halloween is more collective than it is individualistic? Because fucking no. Even the most normie of the normies like Halloween insofar as they can choose their own individual Halloween costumes. But more to the point. I agree with you that Halloween has good qualities to it. My issue is your need to internalize those good qualities through Marxism or socialism. Because as most Marxists or neo-Hegelians will probably tell you, historical materialism and a hatred of anything considered supernatural, by virtue of it being a quote-unquote opiate of the masses, is fundamental to their perspective. And ironically, this does make you a Marxist equivalent of a heretic to try and defend the supernatural against materialism. But here's the thing. I am not thereby saying that you should abandon your love of Halloween. I'm saying the opposite. If your socialism and your Marxism and being internally consistent with those things means that you have to deliberately avoid Halloween, you should choose Halloween over your moral schema. If your worldview makes you more miserable and prevents you from enjoying things that would otherwise be pleasant and enjoyable and bring meaning to your life, you should side with the things that give your life meaning over the ideological purity spiral. But just because I am okay with you avoiding the ideological purity spiral doesn't mean that I'm going to sit here and allow you to stick socialism's red and black flag into the side of Halloween and claim it as your intellectual property. Because as I will say later this month, and I have said many years running to all of the moralistic cretins on the Bible thumper side, just because something good comes out of a thing that is not yours doesn't mean that it's not good, and it doesn't mean that you should try to quote unquote reclaim it. As I said at the top, you should just sometimes learn to be okay with the fact that good things come from something that isn't you. Because what that essentially amounts to is the world containing more good things than any one perspective or ideology can allow for. And in everyone who isn't an ideologically possessed moron's mind, that is something to be praised and looked forward to, not something to be condemned or fucking assimilated like the freaking Borg. Because this is the main reason why I bring up these articles every year. Because it fundamentally frustrates me that rather than enjoy something that isn't theirs and making room for something that isn't theirs, people will instead try to lay claim to something that is a human universal. And in so doing, they attempt to turn something that is explicitly about a love of the liminal, the macabre, and the risque into something that's morally pure. And Halloween don't function like that. Nor does Christmas either, for similar although slightly contrary reasons. But that's neither here nor there. We will get to that, I am certain, in December. Maybe. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now my stuff.
Yep.
So the first thing was I just seen this on like my Google feed is from bloodydisgusting.com, published about 5 days, September 30th, 2024. James Wan's Creature from the Black Lagoon movie gets a writer. That's written by John Squires.
This, on the face of it, sounds really interesting. Although, honestly, I'd like to see Guillermo del Toro do a few more spins on the monster movie. Because, like,
he's
Shape of
doing
Water was
Frankenstein.
really good, and I wish he would do the other Universal monsters. Because Shape of
doing
Water was
Frankenstein.
kind of or shit.
He's doing Frankenstein. You didn't hear about that?
No, I didn't. I'm interested to see if he'll actually go based on the novel or if he'll do an homage to the 1940s one, like everybody else does.
I feel like he'll do both, to be fair.
Yeah, that's also possible. But my only issue is Guillermo, especially recently, has bought into the whole everything is fascist mentality that Hollywood has been spewing for the last few years. And I really don't want to see him do with Frankenstein what the article we started with did to Frankenstein, because that would really depress me if Guillermo del Toro became such a Antifa type pseudo intellectual that he projects it onto Frankenstein. Moving on.
In addition to Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, Robert Eggers' new Nosferatu, which that trailer with later this month we will be reacting to. Because I watched that and I thought it was really cool. And Leigh Whannell's Wolfman, another classic horror movie monster, is getting ready for a return with director James Wan's Creature from the Black Lagoon, and works from Atomic Monster and Universal Pictures. The project has now landed a writer, Deadline reports today. Sean Tretta from Mayans MC Motorcycle Club, it's like a spinoff of Sons of Anarchy, and Star Trek Picard will write the film.
The Star Trek Picard thing gives me pause to be excited here, because I think third season, when Q shows up, notwithstanding Picard was shit. But I'm hoping that I'm wrong. I have all the faith in James Wan doing this, because he made a name for himself with horror, and he's very good vis-a-vis, Aquaman at doing underwater stuff and using aquatic imagery really well. So if anyone's going to be able to do an interesting spin on the Creature from the Black Lagoon, it's going to be James Wan.
Right. It's also okay. Deadline notes the screenplay is based off a treatment written by James Wan, Raphael, and Brian Cohn. And I'm gonna look those guys up real quick. But yeah, believe it or not, it's cool that the Creature of the Black Lagoon is finally getting a lot more notice, because he only got one film originally.
Interesting.
Okay. And then okay. Nothing really on the other guys who did the treatment for the film, but Deadline also reports Wan is in early talks to potentially direct a grounded, modernized retelling that leans into visceral horror whilst paying respect to the original classic.
I don't know how I feel about it being grounded and realistic. That tends to be a shorthand for all the cool shit is sucked out.
True. Unlike fellow Universal Monster classics, including Frankenstein, Wolfman, and Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon hasn't been the subject of countless remakes over the years, which makes it ripe for revival here in the present day. Guillermo del Toro's Oscar winner, The Shape of Water, was heavily influenced by the classic tale, though not an official adaptation, which is sad.
I mean, honestly, if I had my druthers, I would have Guillermo do an entire monster universe like Shape of Water, because I can guarantee you that his vampire romance would be better than anything that Twilight ever did, and it might even give Anne Rice a run for its money.
Speaking of which, has anyone watched the interview with the vampire series on AMC?
The series, no.
I've heard a lot of good things about it. Actually, like it's actually like a true proper adaptation.
Interesting.
Like they're doing the vampire Lestat after 2 seasons of the first book.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's good. I don't know one way or the other. Because we don't have terrestrial TV anymore.
It's on AMC. That's not terrestrial. That's cable.
It's a television channel, though, is my point. We don't have those. We have streaming.
I think you can also, like, it's an app, too.
Yeah, but you either have to pay for the channel, or you have to get someone else's access code to use it.
Okay. Directed by Jack Arnold, the original Creature from the Black Lagoon came along 2 decades after Universal established themselves as horror powerhouses in the 1930s, released in 1954. Huh. It was followed by sequels. Okay, no, I was wrong. It did get sequels, but followed by sequels: Revenge of the Creature, 1955, and The Creature Walks Among Us, 1956. Huh. With various planned remakes over the years, failing to ever see the light of day. One of which was meant to be. Actually, yeah, let's make it. Filmmakers attached / approached for various unmade creature projects over the years include John Carpenter, Peter Jackson, Ivan Reitman, and Breck Eisner, to name just a few. John Carpenter got pretty fucking far in production.
All of those sound awesome.
Yeah.
No offense to James Wan, obviously, but again, the grounded, realistic thing bothers me.
Right. But John Carpenter, like there are literal designs, like concept arts, and even like sculptures and like full bodysuits that were created for his version, like in the remake in the 90s he was going to do.
I'm kind of mad he didn't get a chance to do those now. Somewhere in the multiverse that exists, and it sounds awesome.
But it's an interesting note that James Wan had recently intended to direct an Aquaman spin-off horror movie titled The Trench, but that project ultimately fell apart. It seems his Creature from the Black Lagoon movie will allow Wan to finally scratch that aquatic horror itch.
I mean, if you wanted to sell me, you did at the end there. Again, grounded and realistic, i.e. no fun and no stylization notwithstanding, I'm still hyped for this, but the words grounded and realistic always mean no stylization and all the fun shit's missing. So, hopefully it is better than that implies. But I don't hold my breath on such things. Because if I had a dime for every interesting concept that was ruined by grounded realism, quote unquote, I would have a lot of money. I could probably pay to go back to college with that much money.
The question would be, do you want to go back to college?
No. Probably not. The parts of college that I that I miss aren't anything to do with the academic side of it. And modern day academia is probably several orders of magnitude worse than it was when I went to school in 2013. And even then, there were certain inroads of social justice in my time that rubbed me the wrong way. Although, in fairness, that might just have been because I took a lot of French philosophy courses and a lot of German philosophy courses. And if people aren't aware, the French and the Germans in the last 200 years or so have done a lot to fuck over philosophy entirely. And all of the rest of the humanities with it, probably. Anyway, moving on.
Right. Okay. So again, this is an archive version, but this is originally from techradar.com. Creature Commandos, HBO Max, release date, trailer, confirmed cast, plot synopsis, and more. It's written by Tom Power and was published September 28th, 2024.
Okay.
So,
like last week then.
Yeah. Creature Commandos will be the first project to be released as part of James Gunn and Peter Safran's Reborn DCEU. Creature Commandos is set to usher in a new era of live-action and animated DC Comics projects with the DC Extended Universe, making way for the rebooted DC Cinematic Universe. Warner Brothers Discovery will hope its superhero-led cinematic franchise can finally give Marvel a run for its money. James Gunn.
At this point, Marvel is circling the drain. All you really needed to do was take it behind the barn and put the metaphorical bullet in its head. That being said, Deadpool and Wolverine was pretty good, and Agatha is definitely on point. So it's certainly better now than it was 6 months to a year ago. So I might be eating my words if this positive trend for Marvel continues. He said hopefully that it would. Because I'm really, really digging Agatha, and I really, really want more good things to come from Marvel. But at this point, all DC has to do to beat the pants off of Marvel is probably just show up and do a halfway decent job. Granted, showing up and doing a halfway decent job has been difficult for the last 10 years and change, so I might be setting my hopes a little too high on this front. Moving on.
Peter Safran, James Gunn, Peter Safran's new look multimedia franchise may well do that too, with numerous DCU Chapter 1 movies and shows piquing the interest of established DC fans and newcomers alike. Among the contingent is Creature Commandos, an adult animated series aiming to get DCU off to the best possible start. In this guide, you'll learn more about the forthcoming Max series, including its release date, from plot details, first footage, and how it may impact future DCU productions. Potential spoilers follow for Creature Commandos, so proceed at your own risk. Okay, and James Gunn released this poster December 5th. Why the you know what? No, it's stupid, but I wish you got an October release because it makes more sense.
Hollywood doesn't do well with dates for the most part. It's one of the things that makes me happy about Agatha, because they rightfully saved it for a Halloween adjacent release date. Thank fuck. Moving on.
Creature Commando will debut on Thursday, December 5th. Its release date was announced in early September, and with the animated show arriving just before Christmas, Creature Commandos will go up against two big Disney Plus series in the festive season fight for viewers' attention. Unfortunately for UK and Australian audiences, the Project's Max launch date has only been confirmed so far. So we don't. Sorry. We don't know when or where it will be available to stream on British and Australian shores. It's likely, though, that it will air on Sky Now TV in the UK and Binge in Australia. Once its release dates and platforms are officially locked in for these regions, we'll update this section. Creature Commando's first teaser arrived in August, which we covered. While it didn't reveal too much about the overarching plot, it gave a tantalizing glimpse into the dynamics at play between its roster of superpowered misfits and the series hyper-stylized animation style. Honestly, I'm just happy to see it's not bland animation style, like an art
Yeah,
style.
it's James Gunn doing what he does best, which is adapting weird shit. I kind of wish there was more weird in his version of the DC universe, but we've been over that, 6, 7, 8 times now? I do think it's both darkly funny and also disappointing that for some reason no one thought to give it an October release date, which is stupid.
We'll likely get another trailer in the near future too. A Creature Commandos panel will be held at New York Comic Con on October 19th. So we'll be amazed if we aren't treated to some new footage as part of this presentation.
I mean, that's great. Could you not just release it then? Okay, I guess it's maybe not done, but could you not release it in October of 2025? Because trying to start a monster-centric show around Christmas, unless you literally open it with a Christmas episode, is going to be really weird. Moving forward, though.
Alright. Frank. Okay, here's the confirmed cast for Creature Commandos so far. Frank Grillo as Rick Flag Sr., David Harbour as Eric Frankenstein, Idara Varma as the Bride, Alan Tudyk as Dr. Phosphorus, Sean Gunn as G.I. Robot and Weasel. Oh, that's Sean Gunn playing G.I. Robot? Wow. It might be just using...
James does love his family connections.
Well, no, it's just... I've never heard his, real voice. When he's played Kraglin or something, he's always done an accent, so...
Right.
I assume that's just his regular voice. Either way, it's very fitting for
Yeah,
James.
or he's doing another character voice, which would still be good, probably.
Yeah.
Who would have thought Sean Gunn makes a decent voice actor?
Zoe Chow is Nina Mizuki, which is like the Creature Black Lagoon lady.
Mm-hmm.
Anya I'm gonna butcher this, and I'm so sorry. Anya Chalotra as Cersei.
Oh, Cersei's on the team?
I don't know if she's on the team. She might be the bad guy.
Either way, that's interesting, and I hope it's referring to, the one I'm thinking of, the Wonder Woman villain from the Odyssey, goddammit.
I mean, I would assume so. I don't think there's any other Cerseis in DC.
Not that I can think of. That doesn't mean that one doesn't exist. It's just, I wouldn't put it past DC to shoot themselves in the foot by using another Cersei, but I'm hoping that it's the Wonder Woman villain from the Odyssey. Hoping.
Maria Bakalova as Princess Ilana Restovic. The name does sound familiar, but I'm not sure.
Isn't she playing the White Widow? Because I could have sworn Yelena Belova was.
No, that's Maria Bakalova. That's the actress.
Okay.
Wow, Russian name, and you think, wow.
At least I didn't make any Rasputin references until now.
All right, Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, Steve Agee as John Economos. Okay. The anthropomorphic Weasel's brief appearance in 2021's The Suicide Squad movie notwithstanding, none of the show's superpowered characters have appeared in previous DC live-action or animated projects. So who are they? Rick Flag Sr. is the father of Rick Flag Jr., who showed up in the Suicide Squad. Essentially, Rick Flag Sr. is hired by Amanda Waller to keep the eccentric group of monsters and supervillains in check. Like his son, Flag Sr. doesn't possess superpowers, but his tactical know-how and leadership qualities make him the ideal candidate to be this group's commander-in-chief. Joining Flag Sr. and Waller on the human front is John Economos, who readers might recognize from the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1.
I really wish they had recasted Viola Davis, because her inclusion just makes things frustrating.
Okay. Unsurprisingly, Frankenstein and the Bride are DC's take on the iconic horror couple. Considering Frankenstein is DC's answers to Bruce Banner / the Hulk.
That I didn't.
Don't think they are.
Yeah, no. If anything, I've seen Grundy be like a Hulk surrogate from time to time, especially in the DC animated universe. But
the mild-mannered but incredibly clever scientist transforms into a green monstrous entity. When his anger gets the better of him, we expect Frankenstein to be a similarly super strong and immortal being. Okay, but that what? Makes no fucking sense. What the fuck? What?
Again, Grundy is typically the DC's answer to the Hulk, if there can be said to be one.
Okay, for one thing, Eric Frankenstein, which is the character's actual name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is a real. Well, okay, to be fair, I haven't read much Creature Commandos. I've done some deep lore dives and like videos and stuff on them.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a very distinct. He's not Hulk at all.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very different character. Plus, the guy has friendships of like so many different characters. Like there was a comic that does like a montage of him asking for favors from superheroes, from like some obscure ones to major ones. Like even Superman calls him a friend and helps him out.
That's pretty badass, honestly.
Yeah.
You'd think someone at DC would have the chutzpah to actually do with Frankenstein what Gaiman did with Sandman, and like do this big overarching story with him, but as usual, DC continues to forever shoot itself in the foot and avoid ever actually doing anything interesting.
To be fair, there are like a different couple versions of Frankenstein in DC Universe alone.
Yeah.
Like the original one from the original Creature Commandos of like the Weird War comics was a private who got injured in battle, couldn't talk, and was reconstructed from I don't know if it was the body parts of his fallen friends and enemies. But yeah.
Yeah, but there being multiple different Frankensteins, again, kind of puts me in mind of the Sandman mythos before Gaiman showed up. So you could very easily do like a monster equivalent of what Gaiman did for Sandman, but for Frankenstein if you wanted to.
Dalton, we could be here all night saying listing all of the missed opportunities DC could have done for a lot of characters.
This is also very, 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 very true.
Okay, so as for the Bride, the first trailer suggests that she may be a skilled magic wielder, with Frankenstein's strange wife turning a hail of bullets into a kaleidoscope of butterflies. She's also immortal and may possess other superhuman qualities. One key difference from her comic book counterpart is that this iteration of the Bride will have 2 arms rather than 4. Although it's weird because the first image we saw, I could have sworn she was designed with more arms.
I thought so too. But anyway,
look, I'm not gonna bitch about that because honestly, I understand it because animation.
Yeah. But on a more pedantic point that I'm going to bitch about because it's my thing, Magic is not a superhuman ability. It is a skill that anyone can learn.
I wasn't sure if they were saying that, to be fair.
Well, they left it ambiguous enough that it might be classed as one, so I'm just going to correct that for the sake
Fair
of
enough.
things. Moving on.
Okay. Responding to a fan on Threads, thanks to Reddit for the screenshot. James Gunn also implied the bride is the lead character in a lot of ways, so it sounds like she'll get plenty of screen time. I mean, I kind of figured, to be honest. Like, given the trailer.
I mean, I don't particularly have a dog in this fight one way or the other. If he wants that to be the main character, that's fine.
As long as, again, it's the whole
As
thing.
long as they don't make her a feminist character, everything will be fine.
Okay. Well, okay, honestly, given James Gunn and what he did with the Suicide Squad, the Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff, he gives all characters like.
Yeah, I assume we will be fine because James Gunn doesn't play that game for the most part.
Not really, no.
But
okay.
in the event that DC tried to force him into it, fuck you, DC, for once again shooting yourself in the foot. In the event they didn't, good luck, James.
Okay, Dr. Phosphorus is a villain / anti-hero who can manipulate radiation and temperature levels. Judging by the show's first footage, he can use his thermonuclear abilities to temporarily fly, leap high into the air, and fire a radioactive blast at his foes. Meanwhile,
so he's kind of like NRG from Ben 10. That's what I'm getting from
okay, Dr. Phosphorus was the inspiration for Blight for Batman Beyond.
Ah,
yeah.
Interesting.
He was actually, he was created in, like, I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was the late 70s or early 80s in the Batman comics. He was like a sort of a one-off villain. Like, he made a big splash given his design being like a glowing radioactive skeleton.
So he's sort of like the villainous equivalent of Captain Atom then.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay.
It's like a scientist who got involved in an accident, of course.
Yeah.
And went on a revenge rampage to like colleagues that I believe he blamed for his accident. Or something like that. I can't remember specifically. It's been a while since I've looked into that character.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Mazurki is an amphibious scientist who's more at home in the lab than out in the field. Indeed, outside of some basic hand-to-hand combat training, she's not action-oriented. Expect her to be the brains of the operation, who used her intellect to get the group out of sticky situations.
Good.
Okay.
Every team needs one of those.
Elsewhere, GI Robot is a military android created to hunt down German soldiers during World War II. His mechanical exterior means he's bulletproof, but he also possesses superhuman strength and carries a middle handgun machine gun extension in his right hand and forearm.
Okay.
The thing I'm wondering is, given how far removed World War II is, because this does take place relatively in modern day, I believe. It's supposed to take place after the Suicide Squad, and that took place in 2021, I believe.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to go with kind of an existential thing with the character, because he is effectively his purpose is done. Like, they won the war and stuff, right? But he's still active, still working.
Right. And just because we live in the modern world, I do have to stress this point. James, for the love of all that is holy, do not make my modern Nazi references. Please, for the love of fuck, do not pull a do not pull a Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio on our asses. Please.
What was wrong with Pinocchio?
He said it in fascist Italy. Because reasons.
Okay.
And made several of the villains literal, officers in Benito's army. But yeah, avoid modern-day alt-right Nazi comparisons, please. Please, James.
Well, I'm just curious, because to me it makes the most sense, because he's effectively he is a gun with kind of a conscience, but has no purpose to be fired.
Yeah. One assumes he will find other targets over the years, but
Tyrants.
again,
Tyrants,
please
like
put
dictators and stuff. So
Yeah,
we get
but-
it. Don't get it. Don't have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
reiterate the point. I get it.
I'm just modern day adaptations be how they are, and God, please, James, don't do it,
All right.
please.
Okay. Originally a Wonder Woman foe, Cersei is a master sorceress who's basically DC's female answer to Marvel's Doctor Strange. What? That's okay. Well, okay.
There are so many things wrong with that.
They specified female answer, not the answer to Marvel's Doctor Strange, because obviously we know that's Doctor Fate. But granted, in the actuality, since Doctor Fate came first, Doctor Strange is Marvel's answer.
Well,
to Dr. Fate.
It's more complicated than that because they both came about independently and they weren't trying to rip off each other.
I know. I'm just saying if we're saying it,
yeah,
to be more accurate, Doctor Strange is Marvel's answer to Doctor Fate.
If there has to be one, yes.
Yes.
And even in the female category, most people, if you ask them, would probably give you Zatanna for that. I'm not saying that Cersei isn't awesome. It's just that is a very weird connection to draw, because there are plenty of other like female sorceresses in DC as well, like Tala. She got a lot of screen time in the latter part of Justice League Unlimited. Trying to think of some other female. Well, there's Madame Xanadu. There are a lot of examples that, in theory, might be something like that. But I will be right back. My cat is scratching at my door, which means he wants in.
All right. Okay, so rounding out the cast is Princess Ilana, an original character created for the series that the titular group, also known as Task Force M, is reportedly sent after for reasons unknown. It's unclear what powers, if any, she'll possess. I do find it odd that they have Cersei here, though.
So Cersei is on the team then?
I don't think they said she's on the team. They just say that she's part of the cast.
She was being a villain here, so that's a little bit weird to me.
No, that's Princess Ilana. I guess my biggest issue with like having Cersei in here is Wonder Woman doesn't get. To be fair, it's the whole problem with like DC constantly shafting Wonder Woman a lot.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Potential spoilers for Creature Commandos. Here's the official, albeit brief, story synopsis, courtesy of a Max press release. Creature Commandos tracks a team of incarcerated monsters recruited for missions deemed too dangerous for humans. When all else fails, they're your last worst option.
Wait, are they saying that people would rather trust the Suicide Squad than the monsters? That's a bit farcical.
Not a lot to go on, but we'll learn more about the forthcoming show at New York Comic Con. But those details are revealed before those details are revealed. DCU co-helmer James Gunn has been pretty open about what to expect from the R-rated series. DC Studios co-head provided intel via his personal threads and Instagram accounts, as well as in a recent Entertainment Weekly interview. Creature Commandos is kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy without the sentimentality. The Guardians are really good characters at their hearts, and that just isn't necessarily the case with the creatures.
Fuck you, James. Just because they're monsters doesn't mean they're monstrous.
I think I get what he means, though.
It just seems like a really like
I think he phrased
cliched
it.
goal.
I think he phrased it wrong.
Yeah, that's possible.
Yeah.
I'm just, as a general, like, on first blush, that is really, really, really terrible phrasing. Is all I'm saying.
I agree. Superman 2025 Superman is the true start of everything. It's a humongous epic, but this is a way for people to just take a little nibble and see what it tastes like. There are a ton of fun references to other DC stuff and a bunch of hints for things that are coming. So I think it's just an extraordinary fun way to start.
I mean, like I say, James Gunn is good at adapting weird shit. And if anything, I wish there was more weird shit in James Gunn's Phase 1, but, like, I don't know. It's just that bad phrasing of the Guardians without the sentimentality thing, kind of. It maybe I'm overreacting. In fact, I most likely am. But that's just some James Gunn has a fantastic talent for trying to say one thing and completely putting his foot in his mouth anyway. He's not. James Gunn needs to consult a publicist, goddammit, or a like PR consultant or something, because he has the worst track record for phrasing things in such a stupid way that it makes people think the idea is bad.
Right.
And that was another example of that, I think.
All right. Speaking to the wrap, executive producer Dean Lorey also revealed that the show will be the first expression of Gunn's DC universe, before adding, "We're considering that canon, and I think it expresses his perspective tonally on what he wants the universe to go. I think the viewers, will be really encouraged to see how completely it's going to inform this new version of the DCEU."
And again, that's good because James Gunn is good with weird, but just James, get a fucking publicist or something so that you can stop putting your foot in your mouth all the freaking time. Because he has a really bad habit of that. Moving on.
Alright, okay, the DCU isn't throwing out everything associated with the DCEU, though, as Gunn pointed out via a pre-recorded message at Annecy Film Festival 2024, per the Hollywood Reporter. Task Force M's journey begins directly after Peacemaker Season 1, which leaves Waller with her hands tied operationally, meaning she's no longer able to get away with putting human lives on the line to carry out her clandestine, morally questionable missions. Instead, she recruits a ragtag band of misfits, not unlike the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker.
See, because here's the thing. I think this is the largest mistake he has made so far. By not just doing the hard, clean break and keeping people like Viola Davis around, this is going to invite a lot of unnecessary criticism vis-a-vis the whole why the fuck isn't Henry Cavill still Superman thing, and so on. And again, either have Viola actually put on some weight to play Waller or cast somebody else as Waller, please. It bothers me that when men are cast as certain roles, they are expected to put in the work to physically portray those roles. And the only reason I can think of as to why you wouldn't have Viola Davis put on weight to play Amanda Waller is because you don't think she should be required to, which is stupid. Because Amanda is the Wall. That has always been her thing. There is absolutely no reason not to make Viola put on weight for this role. And it kind of annoys me. But frankly, I think you should recast her aside from that, just because making a clean break from the previous order would be good for you to invite less comparisons and asking why certain things are arbitrarily still canon while certain things aren't. I, for example, would very much like an answer, please, as to why the Justice Society is no longer a thing, but that's neither here nor there.
All right, like those two DCEU projects, the latter is also part of the DCU, but more on the complexities of both cinematic franchises later. Creature Commandos will lean heavily into the hyperviolence and dark humor that are cornerstones of DC Comics.
I mean,
I could see dark humor. Hyperviolence depends on the
the 80s and 90s certainly. If that's where his head is at, then yeah, I can sort of see where he's coming from with that.
In conversation with CBR.com, Frank Grillo confirmed it'll be a hard R series and that fans can expect funny and filthy moments to be dotted throughout. Okay.
Again, James Gunn is very good at this particular wheelhouse, so I'm not gonna entirely I am broadly speaking optimistic about this. There's just the occasional moment where James Gunn's foot goes in his mouth that worries me. But that might just be down to he's one of those creative types who isn't good at doing the public face thing. But DC should have really dealt with this by getting the man a publicist or a social media agent or something, so as to avoid the constant open mouth insert foot disease. Moving on.
All right. Okay. And don't worry, despite Gunn's assertions that Creature Commandos story won't be a sentimental affair, it'll still be heart-wrenchingly relatable. Discussing Frankenstein and G.I. Robot in particular, Gunn told Entertainment Weekly, Frankenstein is this incredibly well-spoken intellectual, but is still driven by his rage and his anger and his inability to really be a human being. And the inability for the one that he loves not loving him back. That's what drives him.
It's an interesting angle to go with.
I mean, to be fair, in the original Bride of Frankenstein movie, Bride didn't find Frankenstein to be attractive.
This is also true.
So yeah, it's kind of a mixture of the book and the movies. So respect there. G.I. Robot has got this very sad history with World War II. Gunn added, the only time I think he felt at home was with the soldiers he served within DC's alternate history of World War II, where metahumans were involved. Okay, so it was what I was thinking of.
Yeah, it also kind of reminds me of Anthony Hopkins' character in Rebel Moon a little bit. I don't know if that's quite the direction James is thinking of going in, but that's what that summary first made me think of. And again, keep the modern real-world commentary to a minimum. I'm begging you, James.
All right. In short, expect the DCU's opening salvo to tug at the heartstrings as much as Gunn's other big and small screen ventures have.
I mean, well, he's very good at character work, so I have no doubt he's going to at least try to punch us in the heart a few times, because that's how he do.
All right. We had no indication about how Creature Commandos stories will affect future DCU productions. One thing is clear: characters from this series will appear in other Chapter 1 movies and TV shows. Okay? Discussing how the revised cinematic franchise will be more interconnected than its predecessor was during a DCU Chapter 1 lineup announcement in January 2023. Gunn said the DCU's various projects would work within one story before adding that characters will cross over into other films and shows, be that live action and or animated ones, as Chapter 1 progresses. Yeah, we already knew this.
Yeah, we reacted to the thing they're talking about when it happened, and we were very confused and befuddled because they only released like half of the slate, which seems really, really dumb to me, but whatever. Moving forward, again.
Right. We already know that one individual will appear in the next DCU productions too. Frank Grillo's Rick Fleck Sr. will appear in James Gunn's Superman movie, which flies into theaters in July 2025, before showing up in Peacemaker Season 2 later that year. In our view, Rick Fleck Sr.'s appearance in Peacemaker 2 will make it harder to discern between events in the DCU and DCEU, but that's an argument for another time.
Yeah, again, this is a bit of a problem. Like, I get James's impulse to want to keep the stuff that he directly worked on and stuff, but between the keeping of Amanda Waller and that whole thing, and then muddying the waters as to where the DCEU stops and the DCU starts, is gonna make people really, really pissed, especially because the wound is still very much open on the whole Henry Cavill front. And James, again, is terrible at playing the public face game.
As for who else might cameo in Greenland projects such as Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, and Lanterns, that's DBC to be confirmed, I think.
I think so.
Speaking to Collider, Alan Tudyk revealed he was open to playing Dr. Phosphorus again, but had no idea where he might pop up next. Keep your eyes peeled for more details as and when they happen.
Next.
Give me 1 sec. Set everything up. Just give me a sec. Actually, yeah, it took me a second to get everything to load and stuff. So I had seen this trailer a few months back because it released I don't know, in either August or July.
Mm-hmm.
6 months ago, actually. Okay.
Which seems like a very stupid time to release something this seasonal.
Yeah. So this is it's called Monster Mash. It's I believe it was made by the Asylum. Which, if you guys don't know who those
Interesting.
are, if you guys don't know who, well, we'll find out in a sec when I play the trailer. But this looked like kind of just a fun little romp. I'll be fully honest. Not
Mm.
like it's cheesy, but the kind of cheesy.
But
think we all-
in the good way, yeah. It's a complete crapshoot with the Asylum whether they are on the
Oh yeah.
fun
Hold on.
side of cheesy or the bad one.
Hold on. I'm gonna check, just because I want to make sure I'm right about this. Because, like I said, it's been a few months since. Oh, there was a Monster Mash in 1995, like a movie.
I know about Monster Squad. I've never heard of Monster Mash as a movie.
Okay, yeah, no, it's an Asylum movie. Okay, actually, wait, did I share audio? Hold on, let me play this real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just go back then.
Jack-o'-lanterns?
Jack-o'-lanterns. I almost forgot about that.
Mm-hmm. It took me a second too, but I found it. It is coming in a little low, though. The audio.
Okay, let me try again. Share screen, application, no, Chrome tab, share audio. Also, let me check the audio on the actual video itself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's pretty high. I have it set to high, like it's on all the way. Audio on my computer is good. All right, let me try this again. Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
A stranger came into my home.
There it is. It's better now.
Took away my child. Tell me who took her. I'm Dr. Victor Frankenstein.
Looks like the fun kind of cheesy so far to me.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's weird. It looks cheap, but also the kind of cheap that you just don't care because there seems to be a lot
Yeah,
of
they put a little bit of effort and stylization into it. Almost as if effort and stylization can compensate for things like that or something.
But it is interesting that the. Well, did Dracula have a daughter ever, like in actual lore?
I don't know if
I know he had the
children or not.
brides. I know Dracula had the brides. Although, was that just a movie thing, or?
No, his brides were in the book. But as far as the historical Vlad Dracula Tepish, I don't know if he had children or not. And I don't think it's ever alluded to in the novel. So I'm not sure. I think this might have been a Hollywood invention of him having kids. Like, for example, I first saw the idea of Dracula having kids in Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School back in the day. He had a daughter there.
I remember. God, they really gotta bring those characters back.
Yeah, they do. But then again, I'm not sure I want a modern day interpretation of them because I've already gotten that with Velma's defiling of the Hex Girls. I don't want more of it.
And that reminds me, there are actually some like short films about Velma that we could watch for Halloween.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'll find them later. Anyway, shall we?
Jack-o'-lanterns.
Jack-o'-lanterns.
And he belonged to me now.
I'm here about my daughter.
You smell like me.
I must find her.
The Invisible Man. I just need a piece of his skin.
What is he thinking?
Unkillable abomination. It will wreak havoc on the world.
I'll be fully of God.
Simple story, but it's still engaging.
Yeah, no, I like this. I wish more movies like this actually existed in like actual Hollywood. It's almost giving me Taken vibes, but with the Halloween skin on it.
Yeah. I think the
It's
plot
not-
was a dying Frankenstein. Dr. Frankenstein is grabbing like all of these other like monsters and stuff, like taking bits of them in order to create himself more.
So basically, Moriarty's plan in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie.
Yeah. But just keep himself from dying. So
So Moriarty's plan from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen movie crossed with Davros's plan in the Magician's Apprentice Witch's Familiar episode during the 12th Doctor's reign.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jack-o'-lanterns.
Among men.
Blood is life. I owe you mine.
You need my help. What's the plan?
Infiltrate Frankenstein's lair and get my daughter back.
Yeah, it's goofy, but like the actors are.
Yeah, it works.
They're not overacting, but yeah, it's just like
There's character acting.
Yeah.
But it definitely works. Makes me want to go watch Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost again. Can't remember the last time I watched that. I don't know why that put me in the mind of it, but it did. Anyway, Jack-o'-lanterns again.
Yeah.
I'm sensing something.
Won't be easy. We're gonna have to rely on reflexes for this one. Gentlemen, I look forward to plunging into hell with you.
Invisible Man seems like he's going to be the funny one.
I'm okay with that. That's cool.
Yeah. All right. Jack-o'-lanterns?
Jack-o'-lanterns.
I would drag this thing back to hell.
Unfortunately,
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to. I don't think they're going to play Monster Mash on it.
I assume that cost too much for royalties.
Yeah.
Still, I kind of like every so often the asylum gets a good one, and this seems like it might be one of the good ones. Although I'm kind of sad in the sense that Hollywood doesn't really make movies like this much anymore. And I keep imagining, what if the same people, the same creators that the asylum hired, had like a Hollywood style budget, like something budgeted along the same lines as like Violent Night or something like that, or the movie Monster Squad from a couple of decades ago.
Hmm.
Anyway, is that where we're going to be calling it today?
I believe so. So with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
Stay spooky and fuck off.